Lilith's saga commences in the Bible's earliest passages. Although her presence is fleeting, her name whispered rather than proclaimed. Within the book of Genesis, a subtle suggestion arises. Adam, the progenitor of humankind, wasn't brought into existence in solitude. Instead, he received a companion, a partner sculpted from the very same earth, mirroring his own creation. However, the conspicuous silence of the Bible regarding this inaugural woman has inadvertently fostered an environment ripe for the germination of alternative narratives, allowing imaginations to run wild and fill in the gaps left by Scripture. According to venerable Jewish texts, steeped in tradition and lore, Lilith was fashioned as Adam's equal, a being of comparable stature and worth. This story finds its most vivid expression in the alphabet of Ben Sira, a medieval text brimming with colorful anecdotes and moral lessons. Later, the Zohar, a foundational work of Kabbalistic literature, and other mystical writings expanded upon this origin story, adding layers of symbolism and interpretation. Unlike Eve, who was later formed from Adam's rib, Lilith was created simultaneously with Adam from the same clay, a shared genesis that underscored their inherent equality. This very equality, however, became the crucible for conflict. Lilith staunchly refused to lie beneath Adam during their sexual encounters, passionately asserting that she was his peer and should not be subjected to a position of subservience. When Adam, blinded by his perceived superiority, insisted upon his dominance, Lilith, unwilling to compromise her principles, made the momentous decision to flee the Garden of Eden, seeking refuge in the untamed corners of the earth, where she could finally exercise her autonomy. While the account of Lilith's departure is well circulated within certain intellectual and spiritual circles, it remains conspicuously absent from mainstream religious discourse. This deliberate omission stems from the fact that Lilith, through subsequent interpretations and embellishments, was increasingly viewed as a figure of peril, even demonic, a threat to the established order. In Lilith's absence, Eve was sculpted from Adam's rib, an act that not only solidified his dominion over her, but also symbolized the hierarchical relationship that would come to define gender roles throughout much of recorded history. Lilith's resolute rejection of submission has transformed her into a potent symbol of independence, freedom, and rebellion against oppressive forces. Her story has resonated deeply within feminist movements, who see her as a pioneering advocate for equality between men and women, a champion of female agency centuries before the concept gained widespread recognition. But what fate befell her after her self-imposed exile? What was the true essence of her rebellion? And how did her actions influence the subsequent creation of Eve and the societal structures that followed? Lilith's conspicuous absence from biblical tradition speaks volumes about the suppression of feminine power throughout history and the persistent desire to control narratives of female autonomy, ensuring that women remain within prescribed roles. Following her flight from Eden, ancient texts intimate that Lilith did not simply vanish into the mists of the unknown. Instead, she embarked on a solitary journey, wandering to the desolate and forsaken places of the earth, seeking solace and sanctuary in the embrace of the wilderness. According to certain accounts, she eventually made her home near the Red Sea, a place shrouded in mystery and said to be a crossroads for the spiritual realm. There, she encountered other fallen angels, ethereal beings who, like her, had dared to defy the divine order and suffered the consequences. According to the alphabet of Ben Sira, Lilith was not content with mere solitude. Driven by her rebellious spirit and yearning for connection, she became a seductress and, more significantly, the mother of demons. She engaged with the fallen angels, forging alliances and creating offspring known as the Lilith, demonic beings that would later feature prominently in various mythologies and legends, becoming figures of fear and fascination. These children, born from her union with the fallen angels, are said to haunt both humans and other supernatural beings alike, representing the untamed forces of nature and the shadows within the human psyche. In later Jewish folklore, Lilith is often depicted as a malevolent force, a harbinger of misfortune and a threat to the innocent. She became the embodiment of the perceived dangers of untamed femininity, a warning against women who strayed from the prescribed paths of piety and obedience. While the story of Adam and Eve is often presented as the cornerstone of the traditional patriarchal narrative, a framework for understanding the roles of men and women in society, Lilith's existence serves as a stark and unsettling counterpoint. She is the rebellious woman who resolutely refused to conform to the roles assigned to her by the divine, a challenge to the very foundations of the established order. Her exile from Eden symbolizes not only her rejection of Adam's authority, but also the larger theme of the suppression of female independence and the deliberate erasure of women's voices throughout history. Despite being demonized in the Bible and subsequent religious interpretations, Lilith's influence has never been completely eradicated, her story persisting in the shadows, waiting to be rediscovered and reinterpreted. Over time, various cultures adopted and adapted her story, imbuing her with new meanings and significance. In medieval witchcraft, particularly during the tumultuous period of the witch hunts, she was often invoked as a symbol of empowerment, a powerful, independent woman who fearlessly challenged the societal and religious norms of her time, offering a model for those who dared to defy convention. Many witches during the Renaissance viewed Lilith not as a figure of evil but as a protector of women, particularly in matters of childbirth and fertility, where she was believed to possess both protective and destructive powers, capable of ensuring a safe delivery or wreaking havoc upon those who sought to control women's bodies. One of the most profound impacts of Lilith's legend is her enduring association with the serpent in the Garden of Eden. Some interpretations of the Bible suggest that Lilith, after her exile, became connected with the serpent that tempted Eve, offering her the forbidden fruit of knowledge. This connection was particularly prominent in Gnostic Christianity, a mystical branch of early Christianity, where the serpent was not viewed as a symbol of evil but as a symbol of wisdom and enlightenment, representing the pursuit of knowledge beyond the constraints of dogma. It is believed by some that Lilith's role in tempting Eve was not that of an antagonist, but as a liberator, offering Eve the forbidden knowledge that would eventually lead to humanity's fall from grace, but also to the awakening of human consciousness. But what is the true significance of Lilith's relationship with the serpent? Was she truly a villain, a force of darkness intent on corrupting humanity? Or was her rebellion an act of defiance against a divine order that sought to keep women subjugated, denying them the knowledge and agency they deserved? In exploring these questions, we must consider the wider implications of Lilith's absence in mainstream religious texts. Her story challenges the traditional interpretations of the Bible, forcing us to confront uncomfortable truths about the roles women have played in shaping religious and cultural histories, and the ways in which those roles have been deliberately suppressed or distorted. The story of Lilith does not end with her exile from Eden or her association with the demonic realm. In fact, her legacy extends far beyond ancient scriptures, influencing not only religious thought but also modern ideas about gender, power, and equality, becoming a touchstone for contemporary discussions about the role of women in society. Lilith's story, once suppressed and demonized, has experienced a remarkable revival in contemporary feminist discourse, where she is viewed as a symbol of liberation and resistance against patriarchal oppression. In the late 19th and early 20th centuries, as feminism began to gain traction as a powerful social and political force, Lilith was reimagined as the archetype of female independence and defiance, a figure who challenged the very foundations of male dominance. Writers, poets, and activists saw in her rejection of Adam's authority a powerful statement about the rights of women to stand as equals to men, to control their own destinies, and to define their own roles in society, rejecting the limitations imposed upon them by tradition and societal expectations. Her rebellion against the Garden of Eden's hierarchical order became a potent metaphor for the ongoing struggle for women's rights in the modern world, a symbol of the fight for autonomy and self-determination. Lilith's transformation from a demon to a feminist icon was not a straightforward one, but rather a complex and nuanced process shaped by a combination of historical reinterpretation, cultural shifts, and the growing awareness of women's voices in literature and art. In the early 20th century, Lilith was adopted by various feminist writers such as H.D. Hilda Doolittle and Judith Plaskow, who reclaimed her story as one of empowerment, highlighting her strength and resilience in the face of adversity. She was no longer simply the rebellious first wife of Adam, a figure to be feared and reviled. She was a woman who sought to live on her own terms, unbound by the constraints of patriarchal structures, and a role model for those who dared to challenge the status quo. However, Lilith's modern significance also raises important questions about the limits of empowerment and the complexities of female identity. Was Lilith truly liberated in her defiance? Or was her rebellion merely a reflection of an ancient myth that reflects the complex relationship between gender and power, highlighting the challenges women face in navigating a world that often seeks to define them by their relationship to men? While she symbolizes autonomy, her story also brings to light the ongoing battle between the feminine and the masculine in cultural, religious, and political realms, a struggle that continues to shape our understanding of ourselves and the world around us. This battle is not limited to the ancient texts but continues to shape contemporary discourse on feminism, equality, and the search for freedom, forcing us to confront uncomfortable truths about the power dynamics that permeate our society. The ultimate question of Lilith's legacy lies in how her story has been told and retold, and the meanings we ascribe to her actions. In contrast to the sanitized and idealized version of Eve, the submissive and obedient wife, Lilith's story is messy, full of ambiguity, and ripe for reinterpretation, allowing us to explore the complexities of female identity and the challenges of living in a world that often seeks to define women by their relationship to men. Her character challenges us to reconsider the boundaries of what it means to be a woman and what it means to reject the expectations placed upon us, pushing us to question the norms and values that shape our lives. In this way, Lilith's exile from Eden can be seen not as a punishment, but as the beginning of a journey toward self-discovery, autonomy, and the rewriting of her own narrative, a testament to the power of individual agency and the ability to define one's own destiny. Lilith's impact is not confined to biblical or mythological texts. It reverberates through modern culture, art, literature, and even politics, inspiring artists, writers, and activists to explore themes of female empowerment and resistance. She is the first woman to stand up against the order of things, the first to challenge the patriarchal narrative and ask, "Why must I submit?" In doing so, she has given voice to countless women throughout history who have dared to question the structures of power and demanded equality, paving the way for future generations of feminists. As we reflect on the story of Lilith, we are left with one final thought. How many other women throughout history have been erased or suppressed in similar ways, their voices silenced, their stories forgotten? What other voices, once silenced, are waiting to be heard, ready to challenge the structures that confine them? Perhaps, like Lilith, their stories, too, are only just beginning to emerge, ready to be told in a new light, offering new perspectives on the human experience. Lilith's influence stretches far beyond the confines of religious texts and mythological stories. Over time, she has become a symbol not only of female rebellion but also of the untold and hidden power that women have possessed throughout history, a reminder that even in the face of oppression, women have found ways to resist and assert their agency. While her legacy was overshadowed by the more famous and domesticated figure of Eve, Lilith's story offers a glimpse into the deeper, often hidden currents of female agency, spirituality, and independence that were suppressed by patriarchal systems, revealing the resilience and strength of women throughout the ages. In ancient civilizations, especially in Mesopotamia and Sumeria, female deities held significant power, representing the divine feminine and embodying the forces of creation and destruction. These deities, such as the goddess Lilith, were often associated with fertility, love, and protection, but also with darker, more mysterious aspects of life like death, sexuality, and vengeance, acknowledging the full spectrum of human experience. These dualities were celebrated as they symbolized the full spectrum of feminine power, an inherent connection between creation and destruction, love and wrath, recognizing the complexity and multifaceted nature of the feminine. The transition from these early goddess figures to the more restrained and subjugated role of women in later religious traditions is a pivotal moment in history, marking a shift in how the feminine was perceived and the suppression of female power that followed. Lilith's origins, then, can be seen as a continuation of the tradition of powerful female figures in ancient mythology, a link to a time when women were revered for their strength and wisdom. She was not only an equal to Adam, but also a manifestation of the untapped potential of womanhood in a world that often stifled this power, denying women the opportunity to fully express their gifts and talents. Her flight from Eden was not just an act of rebellion against Adam's authority, but a rejection of the restrictive roles imposed on women by emerging patriarchal religious orders, a defiant act of self-preservation. This rejection, however, was not the end of Lilith's influence. Her story was repurposed and reimagined through the centuries, often in ways that preserved her as a symbol of female autonomy and strength, even as her name became associated with darkness and demonization, a testament to her enduring power. Throughout medieval Christian thought, Lilith was transformed into a seductress and a danger to both men and children, a figure of fear and suspicion. This transformation was particularly pronounced as fears of witches and women's power grew during the witch hunts of the 16th and 17th centuries, a period of intense persecution and violence against women. Interestingly, the depiction of Lilith as a demon who preyed upon newborn children and pregnant women reflects a deeper fear of women who defied the prescribed roles of motherhood and wifehood, challenging the very foundations of patriarchal society. This fear of Lilith as a danger to society is not merely about her independence but about the challenge she posed to the very foundation of the gender roles that upheld patriarchal structures, a challenge to the established order. The idea of Lilith as a mother who was not controlled by the needs of her children but instead operated according to her own desires became a powerful symbol of defiance and a subject of both fascination and horror, representing the complexities of female identity and the challenges of balancing motherhood with personal autonomy. But Lilith's legacy is not just confined to ancient mythology or medieval demonology. Her influence persists in modern spirituality, art, and culture, inspiring new interpretations and challenging traditional perspectives. In contemporary paganism, Wicca, and feminist spiritual practices, Lilith is often embraced as a figure of empowerment, a symbol of female strength and independence. She is invoked in rituals celebrating female strength and freedom, as well as in practices that seek to break free from the constraints of traditional gender roles, allowing women to reclaim their power and embrace their authentic selves. Her portrayal in modern art and literature has shifted as well, with many seeing Lilith not as a villain but as a woman who dared to claim her own space in the world, defying the limitations imposed upon her by society. In literature, she has been portrayed as a tragic figure who is misunderstood, or as a fierce rebel who serves as a role model for women seeking to break free from oppression, offering a complex and nuanced perspective on her story. These portrayals often contrast with the traditional view of Lilith as a temptress or demon, reflecting the changing attitudes toward gender and power in modern society, and the growing recognition of the importance of female agency and self-determination. However, Lilith's complex legacy invites reflection on how societies view powerful women. How does the suppression of Lilith's story mirror the ways in which powerful women have been erased or demonized throughout history, their accomplishments minimized, their voices silenced? What does her transformation from an equal partner to a demon say about the lengths to which patriarchal systems will go to maintain control over women's autonomy, using fear and intimidation to keep women in their place? The lingering question of Lilith's true nature continues to captivate and challenge us, forcing us to confront our own biases and assumptions about gender and power. Was she truly a threat to Adam and the divine order, a force of chaos and destruction? Or did her exile symbolize something deeper, the rejection of a world that demanded women be subjugated to men, denying them their rightful place as equals? Her story, while veiled in myth and legend, invites us to reconsider the roles women have played in shaping history, and to reflect on how those roles continue to be defined and redefined in the modern world, a process of constant negotiation and reevaluation. As the centuries passed, Lilith's story evolved, gaining complexity and significance in various cultural contexts, reflecting the changing attitudes toward women and the ongoing struggle for equality. While the early texts associated her with demonic traits and the dangerous unknown, later interpretations began to see Lilith as a figure who represented something far more significant, a powerful archetype of unbridled femininity and autonomy, a symbol of the potential that lies within every woman. As such, Lilith's influence in history was not just about her rejection of Adam's authority, but about what her story represented for all women who sought to challenge the structures of power, a beacon of hope and inspiration for those who dared to defy convention. In the Renaissance period, with the rise of humanism and a renewed interest in classical ideas, Lilith was re-examined through the lens of art and literature, a period of intellectual and artistic flourishing. Artists, writers, and scholars began to explore themes of female power, sexuality, and agency in ways that had previously been suppressed, challenging the traditional representations of women and paving the way for new perspectives. One of the most notable examples of this resurgence is seen in the work of Italian philosopher and poet Giovanni Boccaccio, who in his De Mulieribus Claris, concerning famous women, included Lilith as one of the most important women in history, a recognition of her enduring influence. His portrayal was not of a demon but of a tragic figure who was misunderstood yet assertive in her own independence, highlighting her strength and resilience. The Enlightenment, with its emphasis on reason and personal freedom, further amplified Lilith's legacy as a symbol of rebellion, a time of intellectual ferment and social upheaval. She became a part of the emerging discourse on women's rights, where thinkers began to argue that women should not be bound by the traditional roles assigned to them by church and state, challenging the very foundations of patriarchal society. Lilith, as a character who rejected submission, fit neatly into this narrative of individual liberty and self-determination, a symbol of the struggle for freedom from oppression. In the 19th and early 20th centuries, as the feminist movement gained momentum, Lilith's myth was reclaimed once again, this time as a figure who personified the struggle for gender equality, a period of intense social and political activism. The works of feminist writers like Virginia Woolf and Simone de Beauvoir explored themes of female autonomy, and Lilith became an archetype of that autonomy, representing the complexities of female identity and the challenges of living in a male-dominated world. In her defiance of Adam, Lilith symbolized the struggle for freedom from male-dominated institutions and the desire for women to live their own lives outside the confines of traditional marriage and motherhood, a symbol of the fight for self-determination. However, these feminist reinterpretations of Lilith's story did not always align with her earlier demonic portrayal. Instead, she came to represent something much more empowering, an icon of female strength and resistance, a symbol of hope for a more just and equitable future. In modern popular culture, Lilith has been embraced in a variety of forms, appearing in books, television shows, and films, where she is often portrayed as a strong, independent woman who challenges authority, inspiring new generations of viewers. In the Supernatural TV series, for example, Lilith is shown as an immensely powerful demon who embodies the rebellious spirit of the first woman, offering a complex and nuanced portrayal of her character. Similarly, in literature, she is often depicted as a tragic hero or anti-hero, challenging the boundaries of good and evil and raising questions about power and submission, forcing readers to confront their own biases and assumptions. Yet, as Lilith's myth continues to evolve, there is a paradox that remains. Her legacy as a symbol of empowerment is deeply intertwined with her portrayal as a dangerous, disruptive force, a reflection of the complexities of female identity and the challenges women face in navigating a world that often seeks to define them by their relationship to men. In many ways, this duality reflects the ongoing struggle for women to assert their autonomy in a world that often seeks to limit their freedom, a struggle that continues to shape our society. Lilith's transformation from demon to feminist icon is a testament to the complexities of female empowerment, highlighting the challenges women face in a world that often seeks to suppress their voices and limit their potential. How society often tries to suppress or control women who resist conformity and how such women can be both feared and revered, a reflection of the deep-seated anxieties surrounding female power. Despite Lilith's status as a symbol of feminine power, her story is far from simple, highlighting the complexities of female identity and the challenges women face in navigating a world that often seeks to define them by their relationship to men. While some see her as a figure of empowerment, others view her as a cautionary tale about the dangers of unchecked rebellion, a warning against those who challenge the established order. The question remains, was Lilith's rebellion a necessary act of self-preservation, or was it an example of dangerous defiance that threatened the established order? Was her refusal to submit to Adam a reflection of her strength or a symptom of her refusal to accept her place in the world? A question that continues to resonate today. The ambiguity surrounding Lilith's story forces us to confront uncomfortable truths about power, gender, and autonomy, challenging us to examine our own biases and assumptions. It raises the question of how society views women who assert themselves and refuse to conform to traditional roles, highlighting the double standards and expectations that often constrain women's lives. Lilith's rejection of Adam's authority was not just a rejection of him but a rejection of an entire system that sought to control and define women, denying them their rightful place as equals. Her exile symbolizes the ways in which society has historically ostracized women who defy expectations, punishing those who dare to challenge the status quo. And it challenges us to consider what happens when we allow such rebellion to flourish, questioning the very foundations of our social structures. The influence of Lilith, while historically suppressed, has found new life in modern times, a testament to her enduring power. As women continue to fight for equality, autonomy, and recognition in a world that often relegates them to secondary roles, Lilith's story has become a symbol not just of rebellion but of a larger, universal struggle for self-determination, a beacon of hope and inspiration for those who dare to challenge the status quo. Her transformation from an exiled demon to a feminist icon speaks volumes about the changing narratives surrounding women's power and independence, a reflection of the growing recognition of the importance of female agency. In contemporary feminist thought, Lilith is seen as a symbol of strength, one who defies the expectations of a male-dominated world, a champion of female empowerment. Her refusal to be subjugated by Adam and her flight from Eden have been reinterpreted as acts of courage rather than mere rebellion, highlighting her strength and resilience in the face of adversity. Lilith's story, in this sense, is not just about defying patriarchal authority. It's about owning one's power, one's identity, and one's ability to shape the world around them, a call to action for women to embrace their own potential. In this way, Lilith is not just the first woman but the first true feminist, defying the roles that history and society would have imposed on her, paving the way for future generations of women to challenge the status quo. Lilith's influence is particularly evident in the realm of spirituality, where she has become a powerful symbol of female empowerment. Many modern pagan and witchcraft traditions have embraced her as a figure of empowerment, a symbol of female strength and independence. She is invoked in rituals that focus on female energy, independence, and reclaiming one's inner strength, allowing women to connect with their own power and embrace their authentic selves. In Wicca, Lilith is often associated with the goddess archetype, representing the darker aspects of femininity, strength, sensuality, and autonomy that society has historically suppressed or demonized, reclaiming the power of the feminine. For many, Lilith is not a demon but a powerful goddess, a symbol of female strength and independence, one who embodies the fullness of womanhood and the freedom to express it without shame, rejecting the limitations imposed upon women by society. In art, Lilith's legacy continues to evolve, and she remains a compelling figure in modern interpretations of femininity, inspiring artists to explore the complexities of female identity and the challenges women face in a male-dominated world. Artists, writers, and performers frequently use Lilith as a muse, exploring her duality as both a tragic figure and a symbol of defiance, offering new perspectives on her story. She is often depicted in visual arts as a beautiful, fierce woman, challenging the viewer to reconsider the traditional representations of women in art, questioning the norms and values that shape our perceptions. In literature, her character has been reimagined not just as the rebellious first wife of Adam, but as a complex woman who is both victim and victor, challenging the constraints of a world that sought to define her, offering a more nuanced and empathetic portrayal of her story. Lilith's story also resonates deeply in the context of modern politics, where she has become a symbol of resistance against patriarchal oppression. In movements advocating for women's rights and gender equality, Lilith is invoked as a symbol of resistance, a champion of female empowerment. Her rejection of Adam's authority and her fight against the divine order have been viewed as allegorical for the ways in which women today challenge patriarchal structures in law, politics, and society, fighting for a more just and equitable world. From women's reproductive rights to equal pay and representation, Lilith's legacy speaks to the ongoing battle for women to claim their space in the world, a struggle that continues to shape our society. But Lilith's story is not without its contradictions, highlighting the complexities of female identity and the challenges women face in a male-dominated world. While she is celebrated as a symbol of empowerment, her story also raises important questions about the nature of rebellion and the limitations of individual agency. Was Lilith's rejection of Adam a personal desire for freedom, Or was it an ideological statement about the roles women should play in society? A question that continues to be debated today. And in this day and age, as women increasingly demand equality and autonomy, are we truly embracing the full spirit of Lilith's defiance, challenging the very foundations of patriarchal society? Or are we still confined by the expectations of the world around us, limited by the constraints of tradition and societal norms? As Lilith continues to be reinterpreted, it becomes clear that her legacy is not static, but rather a dynamic and evolving narrative, shaped by the changing. Lilith's story invariably leads to an examination of societal perceptions regarding womanhood and the expectations placed upon women's behavior. The central question persists: to what extent has Lilith's narrative genuinely been reclaimed, and how much of her rebellious spirit are we still hesitant to embrace? Is the world truly prepared to receive the entirety of Lilith's message? Or do we remain wary of women who assert their independence and challenge prescribed roles? The echoes of Lilith's influence will undoubtedly resonate as long as the pursuit of gender equality endures. Her story serves as a potent reminder that the quest for autonomy, the freedom to make individual choices, and the inherent right to live a life unburdened by oppression remains as relevant today as it was in ancient times. Lilith's act of defiance was not solely directed at Adam or the divine order. It was a challenge to the very structures that sought to constrain the agency and diminish the power of women. In this respect, she will forever stand as a powerful symbol of the ongoing fight for women's rights and self-determination, a beacon illuminating the path toward a more equitable future. Lilith's act of defiance should not be confined to mere personal rebellion. It's a narrative that reverberates through the annals of time, echoing through the foundational principles of religious, philosophical, and cultural discussions concerning power, gender dynamics, and individual freedom. The moment Lilith chose to depart from Eden marked a watershed moment in biblical history, a pivotal juncture that would forever alter the course of human understanding. Her departure was more than just a physical act of leaving. It was a profound act of defiance that forever reshaped how humanity would perceive the roles of women in both sacred and secular contexts. Lilith's departure from Eden is often interpreted as the original act of disobedience, a fall from grace, if you will. However, her rebellion was not directed against God's command per se, but against the inherent inequality she perceived within the very structure of divine order. Unlike Eve, who was fashioned as a companion for Adam from his rib, Lilith was formed from the same clay as Adam, a symbolic representation of her equal creation and inherent status. But when Adam demanded submission from her, Lilith staunchly resisted, arguing that as his equal, she should not be subjugated to his will. This defiant act, while not widely discussed in the Bible, has had profound and far-reaching implications for how subsequent generations have viewed the roles of women in relation to men. Lilith's flight from Eden was not simply about rejecting Adam's authority. It was about rejecting a world in which patriarchal systems were beginning to take root and solidify. In many ways, her departure was symbolic of a refusal to accept an unequal relationship, a stance that would later resonate deeply with those who advocated for women's rights and gender equality. Lilith's rebellion against Adam set a precedent that was almost immediately disregarded or erased by later religious traditions. In the official biblical narrative, the creation story underwent alterations, with Eve being created from Adam's rib to emphasize her secondary role in relation to him. Lilith's story, once potentially part of the original creation narrative, became overshadowed, and the voice of the first woman was effectively silenced. The silence surrounding Lilith can be seen as one of the earliest instances of how women's voices have been systematically removed or diminished in historical, religious, and political texts, a pattern that would continue to plague women throughout history. However, the suppression of Lilith's story did not mean that her influence vanished entirely. Far from it. The themes of her defiance and exile found new life in the medieval and early modern periods when the role of women in society was increasingly defined by marriage and motherhood. The character of Lilith, now demonized, came to represent the dangers of female autonomy, an autonomy that posed a significant threat to the very foundation of male-dominated societies. In the early Christian period, the figure of Lilith became inextricably linked to witchcraft, sexuality, and the concept of evil. She was often portrayed as a dangerous entity, frequently depicted as a seductress or temptress who preyed upon men and infants, instilling fear and anxiety. The association of Lilith with these fears played into larger cultural anxieties surrounding female sexuality and the potential for female power. In a time when women were expected to be obedient, controlled, and subservient, Lilith's defiance represented everything that society feared. An untamed woman with the power to challenge the very order of things. Yet, it was precisely this fear of Lilith that allowed her to endure as a symbol of resistance. While she was demonized in religious texts and folklore, she was also embraced by those who saw her as a symbol of the untapped potential of women. In the 19th and 20th centuries, with the rise of the feminist movement, Lilith was reclaimed once again. This time, she was seen as a heroine, a woman who rejected the constraints placed upon her, and who symbolized the struggle for women's liberation. As feminism gained traction, the idea of Lilith as a figure of empowerment grew. Her rebellion against Adam's authority, once viewed as a transgression, was now understood as a bold act of self-assertion. Her departure from Eden was not simply an act of defiance against Adam. It was an act of liberation, one that pointed to the possibility of a world where women were not bound by the expectations of marriage, motherhood, and submission. In this light, Lilith became an enduring symbol of the feminist struggle, a woman who refused to be defined by the roles that others sought to impose upon her. Lilith's defiance continues to ripple through history, echoing through centuries of cultural and religious transformation. Her rebellion, initially cast aside in favor of Eve's more compliant narrative, became the foundation for a much larger discourse surrounding gender, power, and the role of women in both religious and secular life. As centuries passed, Lilith's legacy was reshaped. Once demonized, she was gradually elevated to the status of a feminist icon, embodying the principles of freedom, independence, and self-determination. In the medieval and early modern periods, Lilith was intertwined with fears surrounding women's sexuality and power. She was labeled a demon, often associated with seduction, infertility, and witchcraft. During the European witch hunts, which spanned from the 15th to the 18th centuries, women who were perceived as rebellious or independent were often accused of witchcraft, and many saw Lilith as the archetypal witch. Her story served as a warning against women who refused to conform to societal expectations. The narrative of Lilith as a demon was constructed to suppress any form of female autonomy that might challenge the patriarchal structures of the time. Yet, while Lilith's image as a demonic figure persisted for centuries, there was also a countercurrent of admiration. As the Renaissance gave way to the Enlightenment, new ways of thinking emerged that challenged long-held assumptions about gender and power. Writers, poets, and philosophers began to revisit Lilith's story, reinterpreting her actions as a form of resistance rather than wickedness. This was a period when individual freedom and the questioning of authority became central themes, and Lilith, the first woman to defy divine order, began to be seen through a different lens. One of the key aspects of this reinterpretation was Lilith's portrayal as a tragic heroine. Far from being merely an unruly woman or a demonic force, Lilith was seen as a symbol of the struggles faced by women who were caught in oppressive structures. Her story became a metaphor for the way women's voices were silenced, their autonomy denied, and their power repressed. This shift in perspective gave Lilith new life as a figure who stood for women's resistance to domination, and her legacy began to intertwine with the growing feminist movements of the 19th and 20th centuries. The feminist movement in the 20th century brought with it a renewed interest in Lilith, not as a demon, but as an icon of empowerment. She represented the rejection of patriarchal constraints and the fight for equality. Women who sought to break free from traditional gender roles and assert their independence saw in Lilith a powerful symbol of autonomy. In literary and artistic circles, Lilith became a muse for works that explored the complexities of female power and identity. She was no longer a figure to be feared, but a figure to be admired for her courage in defying the norms of her time. Moreover, Lilith's influence extended beyond the feminist movement. In contemporary spiritual practices, particularly in Wicca and other forms of modern paganism, Lilith is embraced as a goddess of empowerment. She represents the unbridled aspects of femininity, sexuality, strength, and independence. In these circles, Lilith is seen not as a figure of evil, but as a woman who refuses to conform to societal expectations, much as modern women continue to push against the boundaries placed upon them by tradition and culture. The question remains, why has Lilith's story been so malleable throughout history? What is it about her defiance that continues to captivate and inspire people across generations? Perhaps it is because Lilith's rebellion speaks to something universal: the desire for freedom, the need for self-expression, and the fight for equality. Her rejection of Adam's authority is not merely a rejection of a man, but a rejection of a system that sought to limit her potential. In this sense, Lilith's story is not just an ancient myth. It is a story that continues to resonate with women and men who challenge the structures of power that seek to define them. As Lilith's story continues to evolve, her legacy has left an indelible mark on the modern world. Her journey from the first woman created in Eden to the symbol of defiance against patriarchal systems speaks to the enduring relevance of her narrative in the fight for women's autonomy, equality, and power. From her demonization to her rise as a feminist icon, Lilith has become a powerful symbol of resistance, embodying the complexities and contradictions that women face when challenging the established order. The resurgence of Lilith's story in modern feminism is not just about reclaiming a forgotten figure from the Bible. It is about reclaiming the broader narrative of women's strength and independence throughout history. Her story is not just one of rebellion. It is one of survival, of existing in a world that seeks to erase or diminish the power of women. Lilith's defiance was not merely a rejection of Adam's authority. It was a rejection of a system that sought to confine her, that refused to recognize her as an equal, and that relegated her to a subservient role. In this sense, Lilith represents the eternal struggle for women's liberation, a struggle that continues to this day. Her flight from Eden was the first step in her journey of self-determination. But it was also the beginning of a much larger conversation about the role of women in society. From the suffragists who fought for women's right to vote to the feminist movements of the 20th and 21st centuries advocating for reproductive rights and equal pay, Lilith's legacy has become a touchstone for those who fight for gender equality. Lilith's influence is also felt in modern spiritual and religious practices. Many contemporary women, particularly those in pagan and witchcraft communities, view Lilith not as a demon, but as a goddess of empowerment. She is invoked in rituals that celebrate feminine strength, independence, and sexual autonomy. In these circles, Lilith is not just a figure from ancient myths. She is a living symbol of the feminine divine, one that defies traditional conceptions of womanhood and challenges the notion that women must be subjugated to male authority. Her story also resonates in the realms of literature, art, and popular culture. Writers, poets, and artists have long been drawn to the figure of Lilith, using her as a symbol of rebellion, independence, and self-assertion. In works of fiction, she is often portrayed as a powerful, complex character who is both victim and victor, embodying the strength and resilience of women who refuse to be defined by the roles that society assigns them. In many ways, Lilith has become a cultural icon, a figure who transcends time and place to represent the ongoing struggle for female autonomy. However, as Lilith's story is reclaimed and reinterpreted, it raises important questions about the nature of rebellion and resistance. Was Lilith's defiance truly an act of freedom? Or was it simply an expression of an underlying dissatisfaction with the roles women were expected to play? And as we continue to fight for gender equality in the modern world, how do we ensure that we are not still bound by the same patriarchal structures that Lilith rejected? How can we embrace her legacy of defiance without allowing it to be co-opted or distorted? Lilith's story reminds us that the fight for women's rights is not just about achieving equality in the workplace or in politics. It is about reclaiming our agency, our voices, and our identities. It is about rejecting the systems that seek to define us by others' expectations and instead creating a world where women are free to be fully themselves in all their complexity and power. Lilith's defiance was not just about challenging Adam. It was about challenging the world that refused to see her as an equal. And in doing so, she paved the way for future generations of women to stand up and claim their place in the world. As we reflect on the legacy of Lilith, we are left with one final question. How will we continue to shape the narrative of women's liberation? And what role will Lilith's story play in that ongoing struggle? Her journey, though born in ancient times, is one that continues to inspire and challenge us today, inviting us to rethink our own place in a world that still often seeks to confine us. The story of Lilith is not just a simple tale of rebellion and exile. It is a complex narrative of transformation, a journey from a revered goddess figure to a demonized being. Her story reflects not only the shifting perceptions of women's power over time, but also the broader evolution of cultural and religious values regarding female autonomy and authority. From ancient mythologies to the foundations of religious traditions, Lilith's transformation is a testament to the ways in which society redefines its symbols, often to maintain control over that which it fears. In the early Mesopotamian and Sumerian cultures, Lilith was not seen as a demon, but as a powerful, independent deity. She was associated with the forces of nature, fertility, sexuality, and the untamed aspects of life. Lilith, or Lilitu as she was known in these early cultures, was considered a goddess of wind, storms, and the night. Her connection to the natural world emphasized her autonomy, free from the constraints of civilization. In these societies, her power was celebrated, and she represented the unpredictable and wild forces of nature, forces that, while potentially dangerous, were also essential for balance. However, as monotheistic religions like Judaism began to take hold, Lilith's image began to shift. With the rise of patriarchal religious systems, the worship of goddesses and female deities was suppressed, and in their place, a more hierarchical and male-dominated religious structure emerged. This shift in religious and cultural attitudes toward the feminine was not without consequences. Lilith, once a powerful symbol of independence, began to be reimagined as a threat to the patriarchal order. As the biblical creation story took shape, Lilith's character was gradually sidelined, and her story was suppressed in favor of Eve's more passive and obedient narrative. This transformation of Lilith from a goddess to a demon can be seen as a reflection of the changing role of women in society. As the societal emphasis on female submission grew, figures like Lilith, who embodied autonomy and resistance, were demonized. The once revered goddess was now portrayed as a dangerous figure, seductive, rebellious, and untrustworthy. This reimagining of Lilith was not just a theological shift, but a cultural one, as women's power and independence began to be viewed as threats to the established order. In this new narrative, Lilith became the embodiment of everything that was feared about untamed femininity: sexuality, independence, and strength. The Bible itself, while remaining silent about Lilith's original role, began to shape her legend. In later Jewish texts such as the Alphabet of Ben Sira, Lilith is portrayed as the first wife of Adam, a woman who was created from the same earth as he, making her his equal. However, her refusal to submit to Adam's authority led to her exile from Eden. In these texts, Lilith is portrayed as a rebellious figure who rejects the divine order, and in doing so, she is transformed into a demon who preys upon newborn children and seduces men in their sleep. This transformation of Lilith into a demon was not merely a religious act. It was a cultural one designed to suppress the idea of a powerful, independent woman and to reinforce the social order that placed women in subordinate roles. The demonization of Lilith did not end with her portrayal in religious texts. Throughout history, she was often invoked in discussions about witchcraft and the supernatural. During the witch hunts of the 16th and 17th centuries, Lilith's image was used to label women who defied social norms as witches, dangerous figures who threatened the stability of society. Lilith, once a symbol of power and autonomy, had now become the archetype of the seductress and the witch: dangerous, uncontrollable, and evil. But what does Lilith's transformation tell us about the ways in which society views women's power? Why did her independence, once celebrated, become something to be feared and suppressed? And how does her story continue to shape our understanding of female autonomy and resistance today? These questions lie at the heart of Lilith's enduring legacy. Her transformation from goddess to demon is not simply a historical curiosity. It is a reflection of the cultural and religious forces that have shaped our perceptions of women and their roles in society. Lilith's fall from grace is a story that has been told and retold to serve the needs of patriarchal systems. Yet her story also reminds us of the power that women can hold when they refuse to be defined by others, when they stand up for their autonomy and independence. As Lilith's transformation into a demon unfolds, it's essential to examine the broader historical and cultural contexts that contributed to this dramatic shift in her image. The demonic reimagining of Lilith did not occur in isolation. It was deeply tied to the rise of patriarchal religious systems and the institutionalization of gender roles that aimed to suppress female power and autonomy. With the rise of monotheism and the consolidation of religious authority, figures like Lilith were reinterpreted to align with the new societal norms that placed women in subservient roles. In Jewish folklore, Lilith's characterization as a demon began in earnest with the alphabet of Ben Sira, a 10th-century text that reintroduced her as the first wife of Adam, one who refused to accept her subordinate position and fled Eden. This shift in her role from the rebellious first wife to a demon who posed a threat to men and children highlighted the broader cultural fear of independent, powerful women. The alphabet of Ben Sira painted her as a night demon who would harm newborns and pregnant women, a powerful manifestation of a dangerous femininity that could not be controlled. This demonization, however, was more than just an attempt to portray her as evil. It reflected the fear of women who rejected their prescribed roles within a patriarchal society. In the Middle Ages, during the height of the witch hunts, Lilith's image was further cemented as the archetype of the evil woman, the seductress and witch who used her power to corrupt men and destroy families. The fear of women who sought independence, power, or sexual freedom was projected onto Lilith, transforming her into a figure who was not only dangerous but also a threat to the very structure of family life and society. As religious authorities grew more fearful of women's autonomy, figures like Lilith became the embodiment of these anxieties. Lilith's association with witchcraft, sexuality, and evil grew during this period. As women who deviated from traditional gender roles were increasingly accused of witchcraft, Lilith was often invoked in the trials of these women. She was seen as the quintessential figure representing all the qualities that could lead women astray: independence, sexual freedom, and resistance to authority. During the witch hunts, this association with Lilith helped to fuel the mass hysteria, with women often accused of invoking her powers in their supposed acts of witchcraft. However, the dawning of the Enlightenment in the 17th and 18th centuries marked a profound turning point. This era witnessed a seismic shift in intellectual currents, as rationalism, individualism, and a spirit of questioning time-honored religious dogmas began to take hold. These burgeoning philosophies created an environment ripe for the reevaluation of long-standing narratives, chief among them being the enigmatic story of Lilith. Philosophers and scholars, emboldened by the spirit of inquiry, began to dissect the very structures of power that had shaped society for centuries. In this critical light, Lilith's story was no longer confined to the simple caricature of a demon. Instead, she emerged as a complex figure, a symbol of the timeless struggle for personal freedom and autonomy. In this fresh examination, Lilith transcended the simplistic label of villain. She became an emblem of the yearning for independence, a representation of the human spirit's unyielding quest for self-determination. The 19th and 20th centuries witnessed a dramatic metamorphosis in Lilith's demonized image. The rise of feminist movements across the globe became the catalyst for a profound reclamation of her narrative, transforming her into a potent symbol of empowerment. Feminists, recognizing Lilith as the primal woman who dared to assert her equality and independence from Adam, began to reinterpret her legendary rebellion. No longer was it seen as an act of wickedness, but as a courageous act of resistance against a male-dominated world. Lilith was no longer simply a demon to be feared. She was reborn as a figure of indomitable strength, a champion who challenged the very foundations of the patriarchal structures that sought to control and confine women's bodies and lives. She represented the refusal to accept a subordinate role dictated by society, the burning desire for autonomy over one's own destiny, and the unwavering courage to confront and dismantle systems of oppression. Today, Lilith has been embraced by countless individuals as a feminist icon. In literature, art, and even spiritual practices, she is often depicted as a powerful and independent woman who defied societal norms, thereby redefining what it truly means to be a woman. Her story, once wielded as a weapon to demonize women who dared to challenge the status quo, has been reclaimed and transformed into a rallying cry for those seeking equality and autonomy in all aspects of life. However, this remarkable transformation of Lilith, from a demon back to a symbol of empowerment, also raises profound questions about the very nature of how narratives are shaped, controlled, and manipulated throughout history. What does it truly mean to reclaim a figure whose image was deliberately distorted and used to reinforce patriarchal control for centuries? How does the complex process of reclaiming a demonized figure like Lilith ultimately serve the larger goals and aspirations of feminist movements around the world? And, perhaps most importantly, what enduring lessons can we learn from her extraordinary transformation, a journey that spans millennia and cultures? As we continue the ongoing fight for gender equality, Lilith's story serves as a constant reminder that the ways in which we understand power, gender, and autonomy are inextricably linked to the narratives we construct and perpetuate about those who dare to defy societal norms. Her transformation from a revered goddess to a terrifying demon, and her subsequent reclamation as an icon of empowerment, vividly illustrates how cultural stories can be repurposed, twisted, and manipulated to either reinforce the existing status quo or to challenge it in profound and lasting ways. Lilith's story is not merely a relic of the past. It is a living, breathing reflection of the ongoing struggle for women's rights around the world, and a testament to the enduring power of stories to shape our very understanding of the world we inhabit. As Lilith's legacy continues to evolve and resonate in modern times, her remarkable transformation, from a goddess to a demon and ultimately to a symbol of feminist resistance, vividly illustrates the intricate and often contradictory ways in which history, culture, and deeply ingrained societal norms shape our perceptions of power and identity. From once being revered as a powerful and benevolent goddess to being demonized as a seductive and dangerous temptress, Lilith's story is emblematic of how women's strength, independence, and autonomy have often been feared, suppressed, and deliberately misrepresented throughout the annals of history. Yet, her eventual reclamation as a feminist icon speaks volumes about the resilience of women throughout the ages, their unwavering determination to reclaim their own narratives, and their relentless struggle to challenge and dismantle systems of power that have sought to silence and marginalize them. The enduring story of Lilith also serves as a poignant reminder of how the feminine has historically been cast in opposition to the masculine, often portrayed as a threat to the established order. Whether through her legendary rejection of Adam in the Garden of Eden or her subsequent demonization as a menace to patriarchal norms, history is replete with examples of women who dared to challenge male-dominated structures being punished, marginalized, or reimagined as something inherently dangerous and evil. Lilith, in her myriad forms and interpretations across cultures and centuries, embodies this ongoing struggle. Her rebellion against Adam's authority, her legendary flight from Eden, and her subsequent transformation into a demon represent the deep-seated fear of women who refuse to submit, conform, and accept their designated place within a patriarchal society. Yet, the very ways in which Lilith's story has been reinterpreted, reimagined, and reclaimed throughout history highlight the enduring power of reclamation itself. In modern feminist discourse, Lilith is no longer viewed as a mere demon of seduction and destruction, but rather as a potent symbol of defiance, empowerment, and unwavering autonomy. Her story has become a rallying cry for those who seek to challenge the deeply entrenched patriarchal structures that continue to permeate society, and to assert their fundamental rights to self-determination. Through literature, art, and spiritual practice, Lilith is embraced as a powerful and enduring symbol of female strength, unapologetic sexual agency, and unwavering independence. In these contemporary representations, Lilith's defiance is no longer seen as a character flaw, but rather as a source of strength, an act of profound courage that resonates deeply with the ongoing feminist struggle for gender equality around the world. In both literature and art, Lilith is portrayed not only as a rebellious figure who challenged the established order, but as a complex and multifaceted woman who defies simplistic categorization. She is neither a mere victim of her own defiance, nor is she simply a demon lurking in the shadows. Instead, she is a multidimensional character who embodies both the profound pain of being rejected and ostracized, and the unwavering power of standing up for what she believes in, regardless of the consequences. Artists and writers who have delved into the depths of Lilith's story have often framed her not as a villain to be feared, but as a woman who refused to be bound by the suffocating limitations imposed upon her by society, religion, or tradition. This profound reinterpretation has allowed Lilith to transcend her traditional demonic status and emerge as a powerful and enduring symbol of empowerment for women around the world. Lilith's story also offers a critical lens through which we can examine the myriad ways in which gender norms and expectations have been enforced, often brutally, throughout the course of human history. By reimagining Lilith's narrative as one of courageous resistance rather than one of abject subjugation, we can begin to question the very systems that have perpetuated inequality and control for centuries. Lilith, in this sense, becomes a powerful role model for the ongoing feminist struggle, not simply because she resisted Adam's authority in the Garden of Eden, but because she resisted an entire system that sought to define her, limit her potential, and control her very existence. Her rebellion represents the timeless fight for autonomy, equality, and the right to self-definition. As we examine Lilith's enduring legacy in modern times, it becomes increasingly clear that her transformation from a goddess to a demon, and eventually to a feminist icon, mirrors the larger transformation of women's roles in society itself. While Lilith was once viewed as a dangerous threat to the patriarchal order, a figure to be feared and suppressed, she is now embraced as a potent symbol of empowerment, liberation, and the unwavering pursuit of equality. In this profound way, Lilith's story is not merely a reflection of the distant past, but a living, evolving narrative that continues to shape the way we understand gender, power, and autonomy in the world today. The reclamation of Lilith's story also prompts us to ask important and often uncomfortable questions about how we, as a society, define power and resistance. Does the remarkable transformation of a figure from villain to icon reflect a deeper societal change in how we view women's power, their agency, and their right to self-determination? And, perhaps even more importantly, how can we continue to challenge and reshape the deeply ingrained narratives that limit our understanding of women's roles in society and that perpetuate inequality and injustice? Lilith's remarkable journey is a powerful testament to the enduring power of reclaiming narratives, rewriting history, and challenging the status quo. It serves as a constant reminder that the stories we tell about the past have the potential to shape the future in profound and transformative ways. In conclusion, Lilith's extraordinary transformation from a revered goddess to a demonized figure, and her eventual reclamation as a feminist icon, stands as a powerful and enduring example of how history and culture shape our understanding of gender, power, and the complex interplay between the two. Her story challenges us to rethink the roles that women play in society, to question the very structures that seek to suppress their autonomy, and to embrace the transformative power of resistance and self-definition. Lilith's legacy continues to inspire those who seek to break free from the constraints of traditional gender roles and to build a world where all women are free to be their authentic selves, without fear of persecution, judgment, or limitation. The intricate connection between Lilith and the serpent in the Garden of Eden is undoubtedly one of the most fascinating and controversial aspects of her story, a topic that has captivated scholars, theologians, and artists for centuries. While the Bible itself does not explicitly link Lilith to the serpent, later interpretations, particularly those found in Gnostic texts and Jewish folklore, began to draw a direct and compelling connection between the two figures. In these alternative traditions, Lilith is often portrayed as the instigator of Eve's fall from grace, the one who, through her own legendary rebellion, ultimately influenced Eve to partake of the forbidden fruit from the tree of knowledge. This intriguing connection between Lilith and the serpent provides a rich and complex narrative that challenges the traditional understanding of the Garden of Eden story, offering a new and provocative perspective on the timeless themes of temptation, knowledge, and defiance. To fully understand this intricate connection, we must first explore the serpent's role in the Garden of Eden narrative. In the Bible, the serpent is often viewed as a symbol of temptation, deceit, and evil, leading Eve to question God's explicit command not to eat from the tree of knowledge. The serpent convinces Eve that eating the fruit will not lead to death, as God had warned, but rather will open her eyes and make her like God, knowing both good and evil. The serpent's role in this pivotal narrative is undeniably crucial, for it is the catalyst for the fall of humanity from divine grace. However, in Gnostic Christianity and certain strands of Jewish mysticism, the serpent is not universally seen as an evil figure, but rather as a bringer of wisdom, enlightenment, and a higher understanding of the divine. In these alternative interpretations, the serpent is a potent symbol of the hidden knowledge that God had deliberately withheld from Adam and Eve, a knowledge that would awaken them to their true potential and their place in the cosmos. The serpent's temptation is not viewed as a mere act of seduction or manipulation, but as an invitation to break free from the constraints of divine authority and embrace personal knowledge, autonomy, and the power of self-determination. This reinterpretation of the serpent finds a surprising and compelling parallel in the story of Lilith. In Gnostic texts, Lilith is often portrayed as a figure who actively seeks to offer knowledge, liberation, and empowerment to those who are oppressed by the divine order, a system that seeks to keep humanity ignorant and subjugated. She is seen as a symbol of rebellion against this oppressive system, a champion of those who dare to question authority and seek a higher understanding of themselves and the universe. Much like the serpent, Lilith represents a challenge to the established order, offering a path to self-realization, enlightenment, and the unwavering pursuit of truth. This intricate connection between Lilith and the serpent is further explored in the Zohar, a foundational text of Kabbalistic mysticism, which describes Lilith as a figure who embodies both knowledge and temptation, a powerful and enigmatic force that challenges the very foundations of the divine order. In this context, Lilith's legendary flight from Eden becomes more than just an act of rebellion against Adam's authority. It is an act of defiance against the divine order itself, a bold attempt to break free from the constraints placed upon her by God and by society. In this sense, Lilith's exile mirrors the serpent's role in the Eden story. Both are agents of change, bringing knowledge, awareness, and the potential for transformation to those who are willing to defy the divine commands and embrace their own autonomy. The connection between Lilith and the serpent also raises profound questions about the very nature of temptation and knowledge. In traditional Christian thought, temptation is often viewed as a negative force, something that leads to sin, corruption, and eternal damnation. However, in these alternative interpretations, temptation is not inherently evil or destructive. Rather, it is seen as a necessary and inevitable part of the human experience, a challenging catalyst that leads to self-discovery, growth, and a deeper understanding of the self and the universe. The serpent, like Lilith, becomes a symbol of the potential for transformation, urging humanity to question the world they inhabit and to seek a deeper understanding of themselves and the divine forces that shape their existence. In modern interpretations of Lilith, her connection to the serpent often symbolizes the power of feminine wisdom, intuition, and sexuality, qualities that have often been suppressed, marginalized, or demonized throughout history. The serpent, in its ancient symbolism, is a powerful representation of the cyclical nature of life itself, the constant interplay of life, death, and rebirth. And Lilith's connection to the serpent suggests that women, like the serpent, possess the innate power to transform, renew, and challenge the established order. This profound connection between Lilith and the serpent invites us to reconsider the traditional views of female sexuality, wisdom, and rebellion. It challenges us to see these qualities not as sinful or dangerous, but as essential to the human experience and to the journey toward personal and spiritual enlightenment. But what does it truly mean for Lilith to be connected to the serpent in this complex and multifaceted way? How does this reinterpretation of the Eden story challenge our conventional understanding of temptation and knowledge? And what does it ultimately tell us about the very nature of rebellion, self-realization, and the unwavering pursuit of truth? These profound questions lie at the very heart of the enduring connection between Lilith and the serpent, and they invite us to think more deeply about the ways in which we view female autonomy, wisdom, and power in the modern world. The connection between Lilith and the serpent is not only significant within the boundaries of ancient religious texts, but has also transcended these texts to influence modern interpretations of feminism, autonomy, and personal empowerment, becoming a potent symbol of resistance against patriarchal control. As we delve deeper into the symbolic relationship between Lilith and the serpent, we begin to uncover hidden layers of meaning that reveal a new and compelling narrative, one that challenges the conventional understanding of sin, temptation, and deeply ingrained gender roles. In both the traditional biblical story and the Gnostic interpretations, the serpent's role as a tempter is undeniable. However, in Gnostic thought, the serpent is not simply an instrument of Satan, but a bringer of enlightenment, wisdom, and a higher understanding of the divine. The serpent encourages Eve to seek forbidden wisdom, offering her the fruit of the tree of knowledge. In this context, the serpent's actions represent a direct challenge to God's seemingly arbitrary authority, pushing Eve to transcend the limits imposed upon her by divine command. In this transformative way, the serpent can be seen as a liberating force, inviting humanity to explore new dimensions of awareness, self-discovery, and the unwavering pursuit of truth. Similarly, Lilith, in her legendary flight from Eden, represents a powerful rejection of the constraints imposed by both Adam and God. Her rebellion, far from being an act of sin, is an act of liberation, a bold assertion of her own autonomy and right to self-determination. By leaving Eden and embracing her own independence, Lilith echoes the serpent's role in urging defiance against what she perceived as unjust divine limitations. Lilith and the serpent thus become intertwined symbols of resistance against the patriarchal structures that seek to control, define, and ultimately limit women's potential. Just as the serpent's temptation led Eve to gain wisdom and a higher understanding of the world, Lilith's rebellion can be viewed as the catalyst for a broader movement toward female empowerment, self-awareness, and the unwavering pursuit of equality. In Kabbalistic teachings, Lilith's connection to the serpent is often portrayed as one of seduction and wisdom, where the serpent, representing knowledge, becomes intertwined with Lilith's own sexual and rebellious nature. In this framework, Lilith's sexuality is not a negative force, but rather a liberating one, a potent force that enables her to step outside the prescribed roles for women in ancient texts. The serpent's symbolism, often associated with the female reproductive cycle and the powers of renewal, reflects Lilith's own agency and her role as a transformative figure in mythology. The powerful symbolism of the serpent, which sheds its skin and renews itself, mirrors Lilith's journey of self-transformation, a constant process of growth and evolution. Lilith, like the serpent, refuses to be confined by the boundaries of Eden. Her exile represents a kind of rebirth, an opportunity for her to embrace her autonomy and her sexual and intellectual power without fear of persecution or punishment. As the serpent sheds its old skin, Lilith sheds the limitations of her role in Eden, emerging as a new, more empowered being, a symbol of strength, independence, and the unwavering pursuit of self-discovery. In this sense, Lilith's rebellion is not an isolated act of defiance, but a necessary step in the ongoing process of spiritual and personal evolution. The serpent, often depicted as a symbol of wisdom, also emphasizes Lilith's role as a bringer of knowledge. In many ancient traditions, serpents are seen as protectors of hidden knowledge. And in Gnostic Christianity, the serpent was revered for guiding humanity to a higher understanding of the divine. Lilith, in her defiance, similarly seeks to open the eyes of humanity to truths that were previously concealed, truths that would empower them to challenge the established order and create a more just and equitable world. Her rebellion against Adam and God represents a burning desire for equality, for freedom from oppression, and for the recognition of women's intellectual and spiritual power. As we continue to explore Lilith's connection to the serpent, we must consider the broader implications of this enduring symbolism. In rejecting the patriarchal world of Eden, Lilith and the serpent both symbolize the transformative power of knowledge and freedom, freedom from the oppressive structures that seek to define, control, and limit human potential. Their connection serves as a constant reminder that true enlightenment often comes through rebellion, defiance, and the unwavering pursuit of truth. It invites us to reconsider the ways in which we view female autonomy, knowledge, and power in the modern world, and to challenge the systems that perpetuate inequality and injustice. But what does it truly mean for Lilith as a rebellious figure to be connected to the serpent, a figure traditionally associated with temptation? Is the serpent's offer of knowledge truly a temptation, a dangerous path to sin and corruption? Or is it, in fact, an invitation to something greater, to self-discovery, empowerment, and a deeper understanding of the world? And in the context of Lilith's defiance, how can we reinterpret the traditional narratives of sin and virtue, especially as they relate to women's agency and independence. The connection between Lilith and the serpent challenges us to rethink our assumptions about gender, power, and knowledge, and to question the very foundations of the patriarchal order. It invites us to see temptation not as a moral failing, but as an opportunity for growth, transformation, and spiritual enlightenment. Lilith and the serpent are not villains to be feared, but revolutionary figures who stand against the oppressive systems that seek to suppress autonomy and the relentless pursuit of wisdom. As we reach the final stage of our exploration of Lilith's connection to the serpent, the full significance of their symbolism becomes even clearer. Lilith's story and the serpent's role in Eden present a profound reflection on the enduring themes of knowledge, autonomy, and the critical importance of questioning authority. Together, they represent the unwavering willingness to defy oppressive systems in pursuit of truth, liberation, and a more just and equitable world. Their connection is not merely about rebellion for rebellion's sake, but about the transformative power of the self and the critical challenge to societal norms that restrict growth, especially for women. The serpent, in many cultures throughout history, is a symbol of renewal, wisdom, and profound transformation. This is not just a serpent in the traditional sense, but a creature that undergoes a cyclical process of change, shedding its skin to emerge anew, stronger, and more resilient than before. For Lilith, her act of defiance in leaving Eden marks a similar process of rebirth. In rejecting Adam's dominance and the hierarchical order of the garden, she embraces her own autonomy, shedding the constraints that society would place upon her and forging her own path. In this sense, Lilith's exile from Eden is not a punishment, but a necessary transformation, akin to the serpent's cyclical rebirth, a potent symbol of the power of resilience and self-determination. Both the serpent and Lilith challenge the deeply ingrained notion that knowledge and autonomy are inherently dangerous or sinful, that they are forces to be feared and suppressed. The serpent's temptation of Eve, traditionally framed as an evil act in the biblical narrative, is reinterpreted in Gnostic texts and other mystical traditions as a necessary opening of eyes, an invitation to move beyond the limitations of imposed authority and embrace a higher understanding of the divine. Similarly, Lilith's departure from Eden, often viewed as an act of rebellion and disobedience, can be seen as an act of self-empowerment, one that seeks to cast aside the suffocating limitations placed upon her and embrace a greater understanding of herself and her place in the cosmos. In modern interpretations, Lilith's connection to the serpent goes beyond just the theological and the mythological. It resonates deeply with current themes of self-empowerment, feminism, and the rejection of oppressive systems that seek to limit women's autonomy and potential. In reclaiming her story, Lilith emerges as a powerful figure who dares to challenge societal structures that have long sought to define women's roles, suppress their voices, and limit their potential. The serpent's association with Lilith becomes more than a simple connection to temptation. It becomes a potent symbol of the unwavering pursuit of knowledge and the transformative personal evolution that comes with breaking free from the bounds of patriarchal control. Today, Lilith's connection to the serpent is embraced in spiritual and feminist movements around the world, where the two figures are often seen as embodiments of the feminine power that has been repressed for centuries, a power that is now being reclaimed and celebrated. In these contexts, Lilith and the serpent are not malevolent figures, but agents of change and transformation, symbols of resistance against injustice and oppression. They represent the inherent power of the individual to challenge authority, to question the status quo, and to seek deeper truths, even when those truths are difficult to confront or defy deeply ingrained beliefs. They call on us to embrace the hidden wisdom that has long been denied and to recognize that true growth often comes through resistance, through questioning, and through the unwavering pursuit of self-discovery. In literature and art, the complex relationship between Lilith and the serpent has been explored in various ways, often emphasizing the enduring theme of knowledge as a path to liberation, to empowerment, and to the creation of a more just and equitable world. Writers and artists who engage with Lilith's myth often highlight her role as a symbol of rebellion, not just against Adam or against God, but against the entire patriarchal order that has sought to control and limit women for centuries. The serpent's role in her story is also reinterpreted, moving beyond the traditional portrayal of a tempter and becoming a symbol of the deeper wisdom that comes from questioning authority and embracing one's own path. Lilith's journey, when paired with the serpent's symbolism, invites us to reflect on the broader implications of knowledge, autonomy, and defiance in our own lives. As we challenge the systems that seek to control and define us, we can look to Lilith and the serpent as enduring examples of the transformative power of resistance, of the unwavering pursuit of truth, and of the potential for growth and change when we dare to question the authority that has historically sought to confine us. The final question we are left with is this: is the serpent's offer of knowledge truly a temptation, a dangerous path to sin and corruption? Or is it, in fact, an invitation to something greater, to self-discovery, empowerment, and a deeper understanding of the world and our place within it? And in the context of Lilith's defiance, how can we reinterpret the traditional narratives of sin and virtue, especially as they relate to women's agency and independence? What price must we pay for enlightenment? What are the stakes in our quest for self-discovery and true freedom? Lilith's act of defiance, coupled with the serpent's enticing offer of knowledge, serves as a potent reminder that the road to empowerment is seldom a smooth one. It demands a willingness to confront established norms, challenge oppressive systems, and embrace the hard-earned wisdom that comes with forging our own path. By embracing the stories of Lilith and the serpent, we not only reclaim a powerful narrative of resistance, but we also unlock new avenues for understanding ourselves and the complex world around us. They transcend their roles as mere figures from ancient myths. They become enduring symbols of the perpetual struggle for autonomy, freedom, and the relentless pursuit of truth. The mystery surrounding Lilith's departure from the Garden of Eden is far more than a simple tale of rebellion. It speaks to a profound questioning of the very foundation of the divine order. Her story, often depicted as the original act of disobedience, compels us to confront fundamental questions about autonomy, the constraints of gender roles, and the inherent right to self-determination. Was Lilith truly the pioneering feminist, as some modern interpretations suggest? Or was her exile an inevitable consequence of her unwillingness to adhere to the rigid dictates of divine and societal expectations? This complex question has captivated scholars, theologians, and feminists for centuries, igniting ongoing debates about the true nature of rebellion, the meaning of freedom, and the elusive pursuit of equality. Traditional biblical accounts portray Lilith's departure as a blatant act of disobedience. She refused to submit to Adam, boldly demanding equality in their relationship. Her refusal to lie beneath Adam during their sexual union is often interpreted as a fundamental rejection of her assigned subordinate role. In the canonical biblical narrative, this act of defiance leads to her banishment from Eden, paving the way for Eve, crafted from Adam's rib, to take her place as the first woman. Yet, beneath the surface, this narrative is fraught with complexities and contradictions. While Lilith's departure is typically framed as an act of rebellion, is it possible that her actions were driven by something more profound than simple defiance? Could her rebellion be viewed as an early assertion of female agency and the unyielding pursuit of autonomy? Lilith's rejection of Adam's authority marks a pivotal turning point in the narrative of the Garden of Eden. The traditional interpretation of her actions often casts her as being excessively prideful, too rebellious to conform to the prescribed roles of women. However, when viewed through the lens of modern feminist thought, Lilith's departure can be understood as a profound challenge to the limitations imposed upon her solely because of her gender. In this light, Lilith transcends her image as a mere figure of disobedience. She becomes a potent symbol of the enduring struggle for equality, autonomy, and personal freedom. Lilith's refusal to submit to Adam and her subsequent flight from Eden can be interpreted as an early manifestation of feminist resistance. By refusing to accept her subordinate position, Lilith challenges the patriarchal structure that placed men in positions of dominance over women. In asserting her inherent equality, she questions the very divine order that seemingly created her to be subservient to Adam. In this way, Lilith's story foreshadows the feminist movements that would emerge centuries later, as women began to demand equal rights and recognition in a world that had long relegated them to secondary roles. Despite Lilith's demonization in subsequent religious texts, her story has been embraced by modern feminists who see her as a trailblazing figure for women's rights. Feminists often invoke her as a symbol of resistance against the patriarchal forces that have historically sought to control women's bodies, minds, and identities. Lilith's rejection of Adam's authority is viewed as an early assertion of female autonomy and self-determination, challenging the traditional narrative that defines women's roles solely through their relationships with men. In this sense, Lilith's departure from Eden is not simply an act of sin, but an act of self-liberation, a refusal to accept a world that defines women by their subservience to men. However, the fundamental question remains: was Lilith truly the first feminist? Or was her story merely a reflection of the constraints imposed upon her by ancient religious and cultural norms? The very term feminism did not exist in Lilith's time, making it inherently anachronistic to apply modern feminist ideals to her actions. Yet, the striking parallels between Lilith's rebellion and the feminist struggle for equality cannot be ignored. Her story, when examined through a feminist lens, reflects the timeless fight for gender equality and the inherent right of women to define their own roles in society. Lilith's story is not solely about her rejection of Adam's authority. It encompasses the broader struggle for freedom and self-determination. Her rebellion challenges the deeply ingrained notion that women should be confined to traditional roles of subservience and dependence. In rejecting Adam, Lilith asserts her right to exist as an equal, a message that resonates deeply with feminist movements throughout history. While Lilith's story is rooted in a religious narrative, it speaks to a universal truth. The desire for equality and autonomy is not a modern invention, but a fundamental human aspiration that has been pursued by women throughout the ages. As we continue to explore Lilith's legacy and her departure from Eden, we uncover further layers that challenge the conventional interpretations of her story. While her defiance has been historically viewed as a rejection of divine authority, could Lilith's actions be seen as a more profound reflection of the innate human desire for equality, independence, and self-respect? The deeper we delve into the enigma of Lilith's departure, the more we recognize that her story resonates not only with feminist ideals, but with the universal human quest for dignity and autonomy. It is essential to understand that Lilith's departure was not a solitary, isolated act. It was part of a larger pattern of resistance to hierarchical systems that sought to subordinate the feminine. In many ways, Lilith's decision to leave Eden mirrors the struggles of countless women throughout history who have fought against oppression and subjugation, from the suffragists who demanded the right to vote to the women who fought for reproductive rights and equal pay. Lilith's story echoes the same unwavering fight for autonomy and equal treatment in a world that often seeks to diminish women's voices and power. Lilith's rejection of Adam's authority, her refusal to be dominated in their relationship, forms the very cornerstone of her act of defiance. But what does this act of rebellion reveal about the underlying structure of society? In the original Eden story, Adam and Eve were created as equal partners. But Lilith's fall from grace unveils a deeper, underlying truth: the inherent need for women to be autonomous, to possess the power to make fundamental decisions about their own lives, their own bodies, and their own destinies. Lilith's exile is ultimately a story of resistance against a system that seeks to diminish the power and autonomy of women by forcing them into submissive roles. Through a feminist lens, Lilith's story evolves into something far more significant than a mere tale of defiance against Adam. It becomes a narrative of the ongoing struggle for women's equality and a powerful allegory for the rejection of the deeply entrenched gendered power dynamics that have persisted for millennia. Her actions, leaving Eden and rejecting Adam's authority, serve as a precursor to modern feminist thought, where women increasingly demand recognition and equality, not only in the domestic sphere but also in the political, social, and economic realms. Lilith's rebellion represents a challenge to the very foundation of patriarchy and speaks to a much larger issue: the inherent need for all people, regardless of gender, to have the freedom to make their own choices. Yet, even as Lilith has been embraced as a potent symbol of feminist empowerment, her story is also complicated by her demonization in later religious traditions, a consequence of her casting out from Eden. Lilith's transformation into a demon also reflects how societies often punish women who dare to challenge the status quo. Historically, women who were perceived as powerful, autonomous, or sexually independent were often labeled as witches or threats to the established order. This tendency to demonize women who defy traditional roles mirrors the treatment Lilith received. Just as accused witches were burned at the stake during the Middle Ages for asserting their independence and knowledge, Lilith's act of defiance made her a target. Her identity was twisted into a symbol of evil. The irony, however, lies in the fact that this very demonization holds the key to Lilith's enduring power. The more relentlessly society sought to suppress her story, the more her symbolism grew. Her transformation into a demon does not diminish her significance. In fact, it underscores the very fear that patriarchal structures harbor towards powerful, independent women. By labeling her as dangerous and malevolent, those in power inadvertently magnified Lilith's role as a figure of resistance, a figure who was ultimately misunderstood and misrepresented, but whose legacy persists nonetheless. In modern feminist discourse, Lilith's exile is seen as a necessary step towards her empowerment. Just as the feminist movement reclaimed symbols of female autonomy, such as the suffrage movement or the representation of the strong woman in literature, Lilith's story has been reclaimed as one of defiance and strength. Her narrative speaks to the ongoing battle for gender equality and the fight for autonomy, demonstrating that the feminist struggle is not merely a modern movement but one that has been fought in various forms throughout history. However, the fundamental question remains, was Lilith truly the first feminist? Or was her story simply a reflection of her time, an act of defiance constrained by an ancient narrative that sought to define and suppress women's roles? While it is anachronistic to apply modern feminist terminology to a figure from the biblical era, Lilith's rebellion and rejection of subjugation can certainly be viewed as a precursor to feminist ideals. Her story, regardless of whether we interpret it as an act of outright rebellion or an early assertion of equality, demonstrates that the struggle for women's rights has deep historical roots, and that the fight for autonomy is as old as humanity itself. Lilith's departure from Eden, an act of defiance that became the cornerstone of her myth, transcends its ancient origins and resonates with contemporary discussions on gender equality, autonomy, and rebellion. Her story, when viewed through the lens of contemporary feminism, does not simply serve as a reflection of the biblical past. It represents a timeless struggle for freedom and self-determination that remains profoundly relevant today. In rejecting Adam's dominance and the system that sought to place her in a subordinate position, Lilith became not just a figure of rebellion but a symbol of the enduring fight for women's rights and equality. While the term feminist would not have existed in Lilith's time, it is undeniable that her actions, refusing to be subjugated to Adam, leaving Eden, and embracing autonomy, align with the core ideals of feminism. Feminism, at its heart, is about advocating for gender equality, rejecting hierarchical structures that assign value based on gender, and empowering individuals to take control of their own lives. Lilith's flight from Eden mirrors these principles. Her refusal to accept a subordinate role and her unwavering determination to live on her own terms make her an early archetype of the feminist struggle for equality. However, Lilith's exile also sheds light on the complex and often painful nature of fighting for autonomy. As a woman who defied the traditional roles imposed upon her, Lilith faced rejection, demonization, and isolation. This mirrors the experiences of countless women throughout history who were ostracized, persecuted, or marginalized for daring to challenge patriarchal systems. The demonization of Lilith, casting her as a dangerous and seductive figure, parallels how society often punishes women who assert their independence or challenge the status quo. In this way, Lilith's narrative serves as a cautionary tale about the price of resistance and the ever-present forces that seek to control and suppress the feminine. Yet, despite being demonized, Lilith's story persists, and her symbolic power continues to grow. In modern times, she is reclaimed as a figure of empowerment, a woman who rejected subjugation and fought for the right to define her own life. As feminist movements continue to challenge the structures of patriarchy and demand equality, Lilith's legacy remains an inspiration. Her rebellion, while seen as a transgression in the past, is now viewed as an act of courage and self-respect. In embracing Lilith as a symbol of resistance, we reclaim the narrative of the powerful, autonomous woman who dares to defy the roles assigned to her. The question of whether Lilith was the first feminist may ultimately be irrelevant, as her story transcends labels. What is far more significant is the fact that her narrative speaks to a much larger, universal truth, that the struggle for equality and autonomy is not a recent phenomenon but a long-standing part of human history. Lilith's rejection of Adam's dominance was not an isolated act, but part of the ongoing struggle for recognition and agency that has been fought by women throughout history. In reclaiming Lilith, we acknowledge the enduring nature of the fight for women's rights, and we recognize that the quest for gender equality is a journey that spans centuries. Lilith's flight from Eden is not merely a tale of ancient rebellion. It is a living, evolving narrative that continues to resonate with women today as they challenge the systems of power that seek to define and control them. Her story reminds us that true freedom and equality often require acts of defiance, and that the road to liberation is not always easy or straightforward. In conclusion, Lilith's departure from Eden, her refusal to submit to Adam's authority, and her subsequent transformation into a symbol of feminist empowerment highlight the complexities of rebellion and self-determination. Whether or not Lilith was the first feminist, her story represents the timeless struggle for autonomy and equality. She serves as a reminder that the fight for gender equality is not a modern invention but a long-standing battle that continues to shape our world today. Lilith's legacy endures, offering us a powerful symbol of defiance, independence, and the unwavering pursuit of self-determination. Lilith's legacy extends far beyond the boundaries of biblical texts, weaving its way through the fabric of religious, cultural, and feminist discourse. Her transformation from an equal partner to a demonized figure reflects the broader themes of female autonomy, power, and subjugation throughout history. While she was once a revered goddess in ancient traditions, her shift into the role of the rebellious first wife of Adam marked a pivotal moment in how societies began to view and treat women who defied patriarchal expectations. This legacy continues to resonate today, with Lilith standing as a powerful symbol of both the repression and the resilience of women throughout the ages. In ancient cultures, Lilith was not always the figure of subjugation that she became in later religious traditions. Before her demonization, she was associated with the forces of nature, fertility, and independence. In Sumerian and Mesopotamian mythology, Lilith was linked to the goddess Lilitu, a figure who represented not only the wild, untamed aspects of nature, but also the power of female sexuality and creativity. As a goddess, Lilith embodied both nurturing and destructive forces, much like the earth itself, which both gives life and takes it away. In these ancient cultures, Lilith was seen as a vital force, a woman who was free to roam and act according to her own desires and will. However, with the rise of monotheistic religions like Judaism and later Christianity and Islam, the narrative surrounding Lilith underwent a significant transformation. These religious systems sought to establish strict gender roles, positioning men as dominant figures and women as subservient partners. This redefined narrative of Lilith was not just a theological shift but a reflection of the broader societal need to suppress the feminine power that had once been celebrated in earlier traditions. In the Garden of Eden, where Lilith once stood as an equal to Adam, she was gradually reimagined as the first woman to rebel, her departure from Eden marking the beginning of the patriarchal system that would define women's roles for centuries. In the alphabet of Ben Sira, a 10th century text, Lilith's rejection of Adam's authority is framed as a refusal to submit to her male counterpart. In this narrative, her act of defiance, demanding equality in their sexual relationship, led to her exile from Eden. This departure and the subsequent creation of Eve from Adam's rib are seen as the origin of the patriarchal structure that would come to dominate society. Lilith's rebellion, viewed through this lens, marks the beginning of the biblical narrative that defines women as secondary to men, reinforcing the idea that women's primary role is to support and obey their male counterparts. Lilith's fall from grace also plays a key role in the broader theme of the suppression of female autonomy in religious narratives. Her demonization, first as a seductress and later as a witch-like figure, reflects society's fear of women who defy the established order. Throughout history, women who sought independence or challenged patriarchal structures were often branded as dangerous, corrupt, or evil. From the witch hunts of the medieval period to modern-day struggles for gender equality, women who refused to conform to traditional gender roles have often faced persecution. Lilith, as the first woman to reject male authority, becomes a symbol of this ongoing struggle, a symbol of the ways in which women who assert their autonomy are punished, mischaracterized, and oppressed. Yet, despite this demonization, Lilith's legacy has endured and evolved over the centuries. In the modern feminist movement, she has been reclaimed as a symbol of female empowerment and resistance. As women continue to challenge patriarchal systems and fight for equal rights, Lilith's story serves as a reminder that the struggle for gender equality is not new. Her narrative speaks to the deep-rooted societal fear of women's power and autonomy and the lengths to which systems of power will go to suppress this force. However, her legacy also shows that, even in the face of this suppression, the strength of women's voices continues to rise. By revisiting Lilith's story, we begin to see her not as a demon or a villain, but as a woman who dared to claim her autonomy in a world that sought to confine her. In many ways, Lilith represents the feminist struggle for independence, self-determination, and equality, a struggle that has been fought for centuries and continues to this day. Her demonization, while painful, also serves as a powerful testament to the power of rebellion and resistance. Lilith's legacy as a symbol of defiance speaks to the ongoing battle for women's rights and the fight against the patriarchal forces that continue to seek control over women's lives. Lilith's enduring legacy as a symbol of resistance and autonomy is intertwined with her transformation from a goddess of independence to a demonized figure within religious traditions. This duality speaks volumes about the way societies have historically viewed and treated women who refuse to conform to prescribed roles. Over time, as Lilith's story became entwined with patriarchal narratives, her legacy evolved from one of fear and repression to one of empowerment. The more society sought to suppress her story, the more her symbolic power grew, influencing countless generations of women who, like Lilith, fought against the restrictions placed upon them by both religious and cultural norms. As religious institutions sought to consolidate male authority, figures like Lilith became embodiments of what was feared about the feminine. In traditional Judeo-Christian doctrine, Lilith's refusal to submit to Adam was not just seen as an act of rebellion. It was seen as an affront to the divine order. The patriarchal interpretation of her story cast her as a demon, a seductress, and a destroyer, embodying all the negative stereotypes that society has often projected onto strong, independent women. In many ways, the demonization of Lilith was a means of controlling women's sexualities, choices, and roles within society, as religious institutions feared the disruptive potential of women who exercised their autonomy. This fear of female autonomy is not limited to Lilith's story alone. It is evident in the broader historical treatment of women who defied social norms. Throughout history, women who were perceived as out of control or too independent have been branded as witches, temptresses, or threats to the social order. The witch hunts of the medieval period and the Inquisition stand as stark examples of how society sought to suppress women's power through violence, labeling those who resisted conformity as evil. In this context, Lilith's demonization can be viewed as part of this larger cultural pattern, where women who defied male authority were seen as dangerous and required containment. Despite the powerful forces arrayed against her, Lilith's symbolism has proven remarkably resilient, continuing to evolve and adapt over time. The 20th century witnessed a significant turning point, as the burgeoning feminist movement embraced Lilith, transforming her into a potent symbol of female empowerment. Feminists reimagined Lilith as an icon of resistance, a defiant figure standing against male dominance and the constraints of patriarchal control. By re-examining and reclaiming Lilith's story, they sought to reframe her rejection of Adam, not as a sinful act of disobedience, but as a courageous act of self-assertion and empowerment. Lilith swiftly became a rallying cry in the fight for female autonomy, representing women's inherent right to exist independently, to make their own choices, and to forge their own destinies, free from the stifling control of men or the dictates of the state. In contemporary spiritual and feminist practices, Lilith is frequently invoked as a symbol of unwavering independence, inner strength, and a spirit of bold defiance. Within certain neo-pagan and Wiccan traditions, she is revered as a goddess of female sexuality, a fierce protector of women's rights, and a guiding figure who inspires personal transformation and self-discovery. The qualities now associated with Lilith, sexual liberation, fierce independence, and unwavering resistance to oppression, are celebrated within these communities, where she is no longer viewed as a demon, but as a powerful, liberated woman who embodies the very essence of female strength. Her enduring story serves as a clarion call to break free from the shackles of societal constraints and to embrace one's own inherent power, particularly for women who have historically been denied agency and opportunity. It urges women to reclaim their voices and to challenge the structures that seek to silence them. Furthermore, Lilith's transformation into an emblem of empowerment reflects a broader cultural shift towards acknowledging and celebrating women's agency and autonomy. As societies become increasingly aware of the ways in which gender roles have been historically constructed and imposed, figures like Lilith offer a powerful means to challenge and dismantle those outdated roles. Lilith's rejection of Adam's dominance, within this context, evolves into a powerful metaphor for challenging the deeply ingrained gendered power structures that continue to restrict women's lives and opportunities in the modern world. She represents the ongoing, unwavering struggle for equality across all facets of life: social, political, sexual, and economic. Lilith's narrative also intersects significantly with contemporary discussions surrounding female sexuality. Traditionally, women's sexuality has been subjected to intense regulation and control, often viewed as something inherently dangerous that needed to be suppressed or strictly confined to the realms of marriage and procreation. Lilith, in stark contrast, embodies sexual autonomy and freedom. She is not bound by the expectations or desires of men, nor is she constrained by the rigid moral codes imposed by religious institutions. Her sexual freedom, as depicted in many modern interpretations of her myth, stands in defiant opposition to traditional views of women's bodies as mere objects of male desire and control. In this regard, Lilith's enduring legacy serves as a challenge to the moral and cultural restrictions that have been imposed on female sexuality throughout history. She encourages women to embrace their own desires and to reject societal pressures that seek to shame or control them. Yet, even as Lilith's legacy has been reclaimed and celebrated by feminists and spiritual practitioners alike, her story remains undeniably complex and fraught with inherent contradictions. The ongoing tension between her original demonization and her modern reinterpretation vividly highlights the persistent struggle to define and assert female power in a world that often seeks to diminish or silence it. Her story is not simply one of straightforward empowerment, but also a testament to the constant need for resistance, of navigating the precarious balance between defying oppressive structures and facing the potential consequences of that very defiance. Lilith's journey serves as a powerful reminder that the fight for equality is rarely smooth or linear. It is often characterized by struggle, setbacks, and moments of profound challenge, but it ultimately remains a path towards self-actualization, liberation, and the full realization of one's potential. Lilith's legacy, as a potent symbol of defiance, autonomy, and empowerment, continues to challenge the deeply entrenched patriarchal structures that have shaped our cultural and religious traditions for centuries. Her story, a tale of rebellion against a divinely ordained order, not only represents a historic struggle for gender equality, but also compels us to critically reconsider the ways in which we view women, their roles in society, and the immense power they possess. The complex transformation of Lilith, from a goddess embodying untamed independence to a demon associated with seduction and chaos, encapsulates the ongoing tension between the repression and the potential liberation of feminine power in all its forms. The reinterpretation of Lilith's myth in modern times underscores the continuous evolution of societal views regarding women's autonomy and freedom. For centuries, Lilith was cast as the quintessential villain, a demonic figure, a temptress, a symbol of everything that was feared about female independence and self-assertion. In these early interpretations, Lilith's sexuality was consistently framed as dangerous and threatening, her defiance was labeled as inherently sinful, and her desire for equality was portrayed as an affront to the natural order of things. Yet, as societies evolved and the feminist movement gained momentum and influence, Lilith's rebelliousness was reframed as a profound form of strength, not weakness. Her autonomy was recognized as a fundamental right, not simply rebellion for its own sake, and her pursuit of empowerment was celebrated as a virtue, not condemned as immorality. Her transformation into a feminist icon is not only a reclamation of her narrative from centuries of misrepresentation, but also a reimagining of female power and sexual autonomy, offering a new perspective on what it means to be a woman in the world. In rejecting Adam, Lilith was fundamentally rejecting the hierarchical structure that sought to place women in positions of subordination and subservience. Her defiance serves as a potent metaphor for the countless women throughout history who have challenged the restrictive constraints placed upon them by societal expectations and patriarchal norms. She represents the woman who dares to speak out against injustice, to break free from the narrowly defined roles prescribed for her, and to embrace her own power in all its multifaceted complexity. This reframing of Lilith's story has had significant and far-reaching cultural implications. In art, literature, and even popular media, Lilith's image has undergone a dramatic evolution, transforming from that of a dangerous demon to a powerful symbol of female resistance and empowerment. In literature, she has been depicted as a complex and often tragic heroine, a woman who refused to accept the limitations imposed upon her, ultimately becoming an embodiment of unwavering independence and inner strength. In modern popular culture, Lilith's story is frequently explored in contexts that champion women's rights, self-expression, and autonomy. She is no longer simply relegated to the role of a figure of temptation, but rather a representation of the ongoing struggle for gender equality and empowerment. The feminist movement has found in Lilith a powerful and enduring symbol of resistance, one that transcends religious and cultural boundaries. Lilith's defiance speaks to women's ongoing fight for freedom, for the fundamental right to make their own choices, and for the right to exist as equals in a world that often seeks to subordinate and silence them. As feminism continues to evolve and adapt to new challenges, Lilith stands as a timeless figure who embodies the unwavering desire to challenge the power structures that have historically sought to limit women's potential. Her legacy, once submerged in religious dogma and patriarchal narratives, now rises as a clarion call for women to claim their space, to reject subjugation in all its forms, and to assert their inalienable rights to equality and autonomy. However, Lilith's legacy also compels us to confront the darker aspects of history, specifically the demonization of women who dared to question male authority and challenge the prevailing social order. The patriarchal systems that sought to control and distort Lilith's narrative have left a long and troubling trail of destruction in their wake, not only in the biased religious texts that actively suppressed women's stories, but also in the very real and often devastating consequences women have faced throughout history for their acts of resistance. From the horrific witch hunts of the past to the modern-day struggles for reproductive rights and equal pay, women who challenge established norms and power structures have often paid a heavy price for their courage. Lilith's demonization serves as a stark reminder of the myriad ways in which society has historically punished those who seek to defy the boundaries of their gender and to assert their own agency. Despite this troubling history, Lilith's story continues to inspire and empower. Her rejection of Adam's dominance is more than just a personal act of defiance. It stands as a powerful metaphor for all women who have sought to break free from the shackles of patriarchal control and to forge their own paths in the world. Lilith represents the woman who stands on the fringes of society, who refuses to be defined by others, and who fearlessly pursues freedom, autonomy, and self-expression, regardless of the potential consequences. Her enduring legacy reminds us that the fight for gender equality is an ongoing process and that women who challenge the status quo, who dare to live as equals, are not simply rebels, but trailblazers who create space for others to follow in their footsteps. As we reflect on Lilith's enduring legacy, we are left with a profound question. How much of Lilith's story still resonates in the world today, and how much of her struggle is still being actively fought? While many societal barriers have been broken down and significant progress has been made, the battle for true and lasting gender equality continues to this day. The fundamental questions of women's autonomy, their sexual freedom, and their right to define their own roles in society remain as relevant and pressing now as they were in Lilith's time. Lilith's remarkable journey, her initial rejection, her subsequent exile, her transformative experiences, and her eventual reclamation as an icon of resistance, provides a powerful and enduring symbol for the ongoing fight for women's rights and freedom around the world. Her story is not merely a relic of ancient history, but a living, evolving testament to the enduring power of defiance and the fundamental importance of self-determination. It serves as a constant reminder that the fight for equality is not simply about gaining access to existing power structures. It is about fundamentally redefining those very power structures that have long sought to confine and limit us. Music, 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 I'm scared. Music, 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 I don't know. Music heat, heat, music, 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 heat, heat, music, music, I'm scared. Music, 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 I don't care. Music, music skin, I know. Music, 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 whoops. Music, 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 I'm scared. Music, 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 I'm scared. Music, 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 music.
My flag sings vipers to the sky. Melodies flows gentle and free, carrying dreams across the sea. In every note a piece of me, forever here in harmony. My flag sings vipers to the sky. Melodies flows gentle and free, carrying dreams across the sea. In every note a piece of me, forever here in harmony. Music lives inside my heart. Music lives inside my heart.